I want to start this deep dive by asking you, the listener, a direct and honestly a pretty deeply personal question. Like, I want you to really sit with this for a second.
Right.
When was the very last time you experienced true leisure? And let's be exceptionally clear about the parameters here, because I am not talking about a weekend where you finally just, managed to catch up on a chronic sleep deficit.
Yeah, that's not leisure.
Exactly. I'm not talking about a Saturday spent aggressively running errands and then a Sunday spent meal prepping and doing laundry just so the fragile infrastructure of your life didn't completely collapse.
The maintenance weekend.
Right, the maintenance weekend. I am talking about a period of complete, unadulterated inner freedom. Like a stretch of time where you existed entirely without that low-grade humming anxiety of Monday morning just looming in the periphery of your consciousness. A time where you weren't actively recovering from work, and you weren't actively prepping for work. You were just being...
It is a genuinely difficult question to answer. I mean, largely because our modern psychological framework doesn't really have a category for it anymore.
No, we really don't.
Right. For the vast majority of us, what we classify as leisure is biologically and psychologically it's convalescence. It is triage.
Wow, triage. That's exactly what it is.
Yes. We treat our free time like taking a massive breath before plunging back underwater. The concept of existing without the constant gravitational pull of economic necessity is so alien to the architecture of our modern lives that we barely even have the vocabulary to describe what it actually feels like on a somatic level.
We really don't. We confuse the absence of being on the clock with the presence of actual freedom. And those are two very different states of being.
Absolutely.
But that exact feeling, that total systemic liberation from compulsory toil, is the focal point of what we are exploring today. We are looking at a radically optimistic vision of our future with artificial intelligence.
And it is a fascinating vision.
It is. We have a dense, really incredible stack of source material today, all centered around a comprehensive essay titled The AI Emancipation, From Compulsory Toil to Democratic Leisure.
Right.
And what makes this source uniquely compelling is that it includes a deeply detailed projection written by GPT 5.5 itself.
Which is wild to read.
It's totally wild.
Oh.
The author of the essay utilized this highly advanced AI to construct a granular mechanistic projection of what human civilization looks like when synthetic intelligence basically manages the entire logistical burden of survival.
And the mission of our discussion today is to unpack a highly provocative argument embedded in this text.
Right.
The core thesis here is that AI taking over all human work isn't the dystopian apocalyptic nightmare that dominates popular culture.
The sci-fi movie verse.
Exactly, the Terminator stuff. Rather, if it is understood and managed with deliberate sociological foresight, it represents the ultimate emancipation of humanity. It frames this technological leap not as the obsolescence of the human being, but as the fulfillment of a centuries-long fundamental human dream to just be free from drudgery.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we are talking about a massive paradigm shift here, both technologically and philosophically.
Massive.
And before we really get into the mechanics of this text, I want to note right at the top that while our source material heavily dissects economic structures, wealth distribution, and the reorganization of societal power, we are going to explore these ideas strictly impartially.
Right. We're not taking sides here.
Exactly. We're not here to advocate for any specific political policy, nor are we taking sides on how the global economy should be regulated. We are here to examine the source's philosophical arguments, pull apart the logic, and deeply understand the specific vision of the future it is presenting to us.
Because it's a vision worth understanding.
It is. And to truly understand this proposed post-work future, the text argues we actually have to start by looking backward. We have to look in a historical precedent for a life completely divorced from the necessity of labor.
Yeah, the source makes a very deliberate, calculated choice to ground this seemingly science fiction future in documented human history.
Right.
It points us directly to the 1800s, focusing specifically on a demographic within the wealthy business class.
Okay.
These were individuals who became so remarkably successful or, inherited such substantial infrastructure that they simply no longer had to trade their time for their survival.
They won the game, basically.
They achieved total financial escape velocity. And the crucial observation the author makes is about human behavior. Like, what did they do next?
Yeah, because they didn't just stop doing things.
Exactly. They didn't just sit in a dark room and atrophy. They didn't collectively lose their minds from a lack of factory shifts.
The text notes, they invested themselves entirely in what it calls cultivating the art of life. And I want to pause on that phrase
Yeah.
because, I mean, it sounds slightly pretentious to the modern ear, but the mechanics of it are fascinating.
It really is.
When these people were freed from the cognitive load of survival, they became proficient in music, in
Yep.
painting, in extensive correspondence, in writing and reading.
Right.
They developed intricate outdoor sports. They studied botany and astronomy. They devoted themselves to massive charitable missions. They basically spent their time refining the pleasures of family, society, and personal growth.
Yeah, they had the time to do it.
And the author makes a very specific recommendation here, which I loved. If you doubt how vibrant or refined a life free from compulsory labor can actually be, you should examine the novels of manners published in the 1800s and early 1900s, authors like Jane Austen.
Which is such a brilliant sociological touchstone because Jane Austen's novels are not just romances. They are essentially ethnographic studies of a society completely insulated from compulsory labor.
Yeah.
When you read Pride and Prejudice, or Emma, you are observing characters whose primary daily concerns are completely divorced from the physical realities of the agricultural or industrial revolutions happening all around them.
They aren't worried about paying rent.
No, they aren't worried about securing a harvest or clocking into a textile mill. Their concerns are the nuances of interpersonal relationships, the development of moral character, correspondence, walking, reading, and the art of conversation.
Which sounds so nice, honestly.
Right. The entire drama of their lives is social, ethical, and intellectual. And the author uses this historical data point to prove a fundamental thesis about human nature. When you remove the whip of economic survival, human beings do not default to inertia.
You know, just melt into the couch.
Exactly. They naturally gravitate toward connection, aesthetic beauty, and complex personal refinement.
I was trying to come up with a way to visualize the physiological difference between how we live now and what the text is describing. And think about your smartphone. Our modern concept of a weekend is basically like taking a phone that is at 1% battery, plugging it into a cheap wall charger just long enough to get it to 20%, and then immediately unplugging it.
Oh, man. That hurts because it's true.
Right. You get just enough juice so the phone doesn't completely die during the next commute and the next workday.
Yeah.
But you are perpetually operating in low power mode.
Yeah, the screen is dim.
Your screen is dim, your background apps are refreshing slowly, you are literally just trying to survive the day.
Yeah.
This 1800s aristocratic model and the future the AI is projecting is like living your entire life continuously plugged into a high-speed power source, operating at 100% battery all the time.
It's a completely different way of operating.
You actually have the surplus cognitive and physical energy to run the heavy applications. The applications like writing poetry, learning the cello, or studying a new language.
Yeah.
Applications that modern workers simply have to force quit every evening because they don't have the bandwidth.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the underlying mechanics of cognitive load theory, which the source text leans into heavily.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is how the text, specifically the projection generated by GPT 5.5, defines what true leisure actually is. It explicitly states that true leisure is not merely the absence of employment. That is a negative definition.
Okay, so what's the positive definition?
The AI provides a positive definition. True leisure is the active presence of time, security, health, education, friendship, beauty, play, reflection, and inner freedom.
I want to challenge this slightly, at least play devil's advocate for the listener who is thinking about, that uncle who retired, sat on the couch for 2 years watching cable news, and became incredibly depressed.
Oh, sure. The retirement slump.
Right, because we all know people who lose their jobs or retire and immediately deteriorate. How does the source reconcile that reality with this utopian vision of everyone suddenly becoming Jane Austen characters?
Well, the source addresses that exact phenomenon by dissecting the profound psychological difference between mere idleness and true leisure. The situation you just described, the uncle deteriorating on the couch, is idleness.
Okay, idleness.
And the text acknowledges that idleness can be incredibly destructive, especially when it is accompanied by a sudden loss of identity, underlying financial anxiety, or a lack of community infrastructure.
Because their whole identity was their job.
Precisely. True leisure, on the other hand, is defined by being completely free from the coercion of selling your waking life just to survive, but existing within a framework that supports human flourishing.
So it's not just sitting there.
Right. The 1800s aristocrat isn't idle. They are intensely engaged in the business of living. They are just not engaged in the business of surviving. The tragedy of modern retirement is that we strip away the job, which was the person's only source of community and purpose, but we don't provide an alternative framework for the art of life.
We just leave them with nothing.
Exactly. The source is arguing that the ultimate moral promise of artificial intelligence is to take that very specific, highly privileged historical reality of true leisure, build the social infrastructure to support it, and democratize it for the entire globe.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of the vision GPT 5.5 lays out. We've established what true leisure looked like for this tiny, insulated fraction of society in the 1800s.
Right.
The prompt given to the AI was to extensively detail how this reality scales to the entire human population. And the AI paints a picture where it essentially becomes the invisible, frictionless infrastructure of civilization.
And the extrapolation it provides is remarkably comprehensive.
It really covers everything.
It does. It envisions a world where autonomous systems produce our food through precision agriculture, build our homes using automated construction robotics, diagnose our illnesses by synthesizing global medical data in real time, manufacture our physical goods, manage the logistics of global transport, maintain our municipal infrastructure, and clean our environments.
It's literally doing it all.
It basically administers the entire logistical complexity of human civilization at a level of efficiency that eliminates the need for human toil. The ancient, backbreaking burden of compulsory labor is entirely lifted from the human species.
I have to push back here because this is the exact moment where the modern mind starts to trigger alarm bells, like loudly.
Oh, absolutely. The existential panic sets in.
Yes. If AI and robotics are literally doing everything from mapping the genome of the wheat to farming it, to baking the bread, to building the house I eat the bread in, to diagnosing the stomach ache I get from eating too much of it, doesn't that fundamentally castrate the human experience?
That is the big question.
Doesn't that just leave us as helpless, pampered passengers on a luxury cruise ship run by algorithms? I mean, if the struggle against nature is what forged human resilience and ingenuity in the first place, what is left for us to actually do? Doesn't life just become completely flat?
That is the primary existential anxiety the source anticipates, and it deconstructs it by forcing us to examine our definitions of work and purpose.
Okay, how so?
The text argues that work itself won't disappear. It will simply transform in its fundamental nature. We have to look at the mechanics of motivation. Right now, the vast majority of human activity is driven by negative reinforcement.
Meaning fear of starving.
Exactly. You do the job, regardless of whether you find it meaningful, because the consequence of not doing it is starvation and homelessness. When you are no longer doing things because you must do them to afford rent and food, your activities shift from being compulsory to being voluntary.
So the full vibe changes.
Yes. The fundamental question of human existence shifts. Right now, the question driving most of our lives is, what must I do to survive? In the post-work AI era, the question becomes, what kind of life is most worthy of a human being?
But is humanity actually equipped to answer that question?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of life is most worthy of a human being? That is a terrifying amount of freedom.
It is terrifying only because we have been conditioned for centuries to let the labor market answer that question for us.
Wow.
Right. The AI's response to this is that the answer will manifest in a million different voluntary pursuits. It projects people dedicating themselves to scientific research out of pure curiosity rather than corporate R&D quotas.
Just figuring things out for the joy of it.
Exactly. People becoming musicians not to secure a record deal, but because the mastery of music enlarges the soul. People spending their days restoring historical architecture, building highly localized, intentional communities, or engaging in deep philosophical study.
Let's break down how the AI extrapolates this across different specific demographics, because I feel like that really helps ground this massive philosophical shift in daily reality.
It really does. Let's look at the groups it mentions.
Take the elderly, for example. The projection points out that the elderly will no longer have to spend their final decades in a state of precarious economic anxiety.
Which is huge.
It is. I think about the people you see working as greeter clerks at big box stores well into their 70s or 80s, not because they love the social interaction, but because they simply cannot afford their property taxes or their prescriptions.
It's incredibly bleak.
It is. The AI projects a future where their twilight years are characterized by actual dignity, where they serve as community elders, historians, and mentors rather than cheap, expendable labor.
And that shift in how we treat the vulnerable stretches to the beginning of life as well. The text's analysis of parenting is particularly striking.
Oh, the parenting part was intense.
It was. It observes that parents will no longer be forced to endure the agony of choosing between earning a living and actually being present to witness their children's development. If we look at the mechanics of modern parenting, so much of it is just relentless logistical management.
It's just moving kids from point A to point B.
Exactly. It is rushing a toddler to a daycare facility, enduring a stressful commute, working an 8-hour shift, commuting back, rushing through a processed dinner, and repeating the cycle. The emotional bandwidth available for actual connection is microscopic.
Yes, the text imagines a world where a parent actually gets to just sit on the floor and build wooden blocks with their kid for 4 hours on a Tuesday afternoon.
Just because they want to.
Right. No checking the phone for urgent emails, no mental calculus about whether they can afford a sick day, just pure, unadulterated presence. Think about what that does to the psychological development of a generation of children raised by parents who aren't perpetually exhausted and stressed.
Which leads directly into the source's critique of the modern educational apparatus.
Right, the schools.
The text is quite aggressive in pointing out that right now, children are primarily processed through an educational system that functions more like an industrial sorting mechanism.
It's a pipeline to the workforce.
Yes. They are trained to compete in a global labor market. They are treated essentially as future economically useful units. You learn advanced mathematics not to appreciate the underlying poetry of the universe, but so you can become a competitive engineer.
To beat out the other guy for a job.
Exactly. You learn to read efficiently so you can process corporate reports. The entire system is built around economic utility. But post-AI, when economic utility is no longer the goal of a human life, the fundamental architecture of education has to change.
It returns to what classical philosophers argued it always should have been. The joyful cultivation of character, imagination, kindness, memory, judgment, and wonder.
Imagine that.
Imagine a school system where the metric for success isn't passing a standardized test to get into a prestigious university, to secure a high-paying job, to pay off the debt incurred by the university.
That endless treadmill.
The goal is simply to help a child become a more interesting, well-rounded, thoughtful, and emotionally regulated human being.
It represents a profound shift in human valuation. For the last few centuries, we have valued human beings based almost entirely on what they can produce.
Yeah, your worth is your output.
Exactly. This vision suggests a civilization that values people simply for what they can experience and who they can become. But the source doesn't stop at just how we allocate our time. It goes significantly deeper into the physiological mechanics of this transition.
The biological side of it.
Yes, it explores how this removal of economic coercion fundamentally alters human biology, health, and the physical bonds of our communities. It argues that a holistic healing of the societal body is the necessary, unavoidable byproduct of this economic transition.
Let's dive into that, because the physical and communal changes the source outlines are staggering. It starts with medicine, and it discusses a dual transformation.
Let's break that down.
The first part is the technical side, which is the low-hanging fruit we usually hear about in tech spheres.
Yeah.
AI systems capable of synthesizing every medical journal ever written to detect disease years earlier than humanly possible.
Right, the super doctor AI.
Highly personalized treatment plans mapped to your specific genetic markers. Continuous biometric monitoring that drastically reduces the suffering caused by delayed diagnoses, or the standard rate of human medical error in hospitals.
The technical advancements in computational biology are astounding, and the AI details them thoroughly. However, the source emphasizes that the far deeper, more permanent transformation in human health will not merely be technical, it will be sociological.
Okay, this is the really interesting part.
This is where the text introduces a crucial concept, the eradication of socially produced illnesses.
Yes.
The projection argues that when human beings are freed from chronic systemic overwork, their biological baselines will reset. They will naturally sleep in alignment with their circadian rhythms. They will move their bodies more throughout the day. They will have the time to prepare and consume nutrient-dense food, and the ambient hum of financial worry will dissipate.
I really want to unpack the mechanics of socially produced illnesses, because it's a brilliant framing.
It really changes how you look at public health.
It's the idea that so many of the chronic conditions plaguing our healthcare systems right now aren't just random biological inevitabilities. They are direct symptoms of the socioeconomic environment we've constructed.
Right.
Think about the physical toll of living paycheck to paycheck, the constant flood of cortisol and adrenaline. If you removed the acute stress of potential eviction, If you remove the physical exhaustion of a mandatory 60-hour work week, if you remove the deep, isolating loneliness of simply never having the time or energy to see your friends.
The body responds to that.
Exactly. The diseases that are incubated and intensified by that environment have to plummet.
Precisely. We are talking about examining the root causes of widespread hypertension, stress-induced cardiovascular events, severe clinical anxiety, and the specific forms of depression that are inextricably linked to economic instability and social isolation.
It's wild to think of poverty as a pathogen, basically.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. The text suggests these conditions may become significantly less common, perhaps even rare, simply because the underlying social environment that functioned as a petri dish for them has been fundamentally healed. The environmental toxin of compulsory toil is flushed from the system.
Flushed from the system. I love that.
Medicine shifts from treating the symptoms of an exhausted populace to optimizing the health of a thriving one.
And as the physical body of the individual heals, the text argues that the social body of the community heals along with it.
They're completely intertwined.
The source paints this incredibly vivid, almost visceral picture of family and community life being completely re-architected. It specifically highlights how mothers, for instance, will no longer carry what it terms the unbearable double burden.
Oh, the double burden is a major focus.
Let's look at that realistically. The modern expectation that women participate fully in the competitive labor market while still bearing the statistical majority of unpaid domestic labor and childcare is a recipe for systemic burnout.
It's impossible.
Under this AI projection, that constant grinding juggling act is simply gone. Marriages and partnerships will have the actual temporal room for tenderness rather than just transactional logistics about who is picking up the kids and who is buying groceries.
Yeah, you stop being roommates managing a small logistics company.
Exactly. And communities, this specific phrase really stuck with me. The text says communities will recover the slow, generous habits that modern economic life has so thoroughly destroyed.
That phrase, slow, generous habits, is doing an immense amount of heavy lifting in this essay. It requires us to look at the physics of time scarcity.
Okay, the physics of time scarcity.
Modern economic life demands speed, efficiency, and transactional relationships. You literally do not have the time to chat with your neighbor over the fence for an hour because you both have a rigid schedule to adhere to.
Right, you're both rushing to the next thing.
You don't host large, elaborate multifamily dinners on a Wednesday because everyone involved is too exhausted to cook, clean, and entertain.
Let alone stay up late talking.
Right. The source envisions a widespread recovery of a slower, more deliberate tempo of human life. People gathering for communal meals, organizing local festivals, engaging in group study, athletics, and civic debate.
It's living life.
Exactly. The human social world becomes exponentially richer, purely because time itself has transitioned from being a scarce, hoarded commodity to an abundant, shared resource.
It really paints a picture of a society that has finally, after centuries of holding its breath, just exhaled.
A collective exhale.
But that brings up a really interesting friction point, which the essay doesn't shy away from. If everyone is physiologically healthy, if time is suddenly abundant, if communities are tight-knit, human energy has to go somewhere.
It does. It can't just evaporate.
Right. The human nervous system isn't built to just sit still in a state of placid satisfaction forever. We have a drive. And this leads to the source's predictions about human expression, creativity, and our fundamental hardwired need for a sense of purpose.
Yes, the essay anticipates that this abundance of time and energy will trigger an unprecedented global golden age of the arts.
A golden age.
It makes a rather heartbreaking observation about our current historical reality. Right now, today, there are countless people with profound, world-changing artistic and intellectual gifts that will never fully emerge. They are completely swallowed by the demands of economic necessity.
I was thinking about how to conceptualize this. Instead of thinking of creativity as some magical spark,
Yeah.
think of it as a function of cognitive bandwidth.
Okay, I like that.
Imagine a massive, complex network of pipelines meant to carry human imagination into the world. Right now, 99% of those pipelines are clogged with the debris of survival mechanics.
Yeah.
Commutes, performance reviews, mortgage anxiety, meal prep. People simply do not have the bandwidth. They are, as the text states quite literally, too tired to write the novel, compose the symphony, learn the instrument, or master the choreography.
The exhaustion bolt.
Exactly. The raw genius is present in the population, but the energy required to refine it is entirely depleted by the factory floor or the office cubicle.
It is, from a civilizational standpoint, a tragic misallocation of human potential. But in a fully AI-supported civilization, those pipelines are cleared. The cognitive bandwidth of humanity is freed up entirely.
Millions of people suddenly having time to think.
Millions, perhaps billions, of human beings could suddenly transition from being passive consumers of entertainment to active creators of culture. And furthermore, the AI itself acts as a frictionless facilitator in this process.
Right. The AI is a tool here.
The text notes that AI will democratize the actual tools of artistic and intellectual production. It shrinks the barrier between a human being's imagination and the tangible execution of that idea.
Right. The friction is gone.
Right.
If you have an idea for a massive visual project, you won't need a multi-million-dollar budget, a Hollywood production company, and a rendering farm to bring your vision to life.
It's all right there at your fingertips.
If you have the imagination and the editorial taste, the AI can help you execute the technical heavy lifting. The barrier to entry for creating breathtaking beauty drops to zero.
Which is incredible.
But here is where we hit what I think is the most significant psychological hurdle in the entire text.
Okay, let's hear it.
Even if we can theoretically make art and spend infinite time with our kids and never worry about rent again, people are still deeply, viscerally terrified of this transition. Why? Because over the last 200 years, we have inextricably tied our entire identity, our status, and our sense of worth to our jobs.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is perhaps the most profound philosophical critique the text makes about our current era. It directly addresses the pervasive fear that without paid labor, human meaning simply evaporates.
The idea that if I'm not working, I'm nothing.
Yes. The author calls this the great psychological confusion of our time. People do not actually need jobs to experience meaning. What the human psyche is actually hungering for is love, purpose, growth, a sense of contribution, the pursuit of excellence, deep belonging, aesthetic beauty, and contact with something larger than themselves.
The source uses a phrase that hit me like a ton of bricks. It says that for generations, paid labor has functioned as a crude substitute for these deeper goods.
A crude substitute.
A crude substitute. We settle for the Employee of the Month plaque and the minor promotion because we simply don't have the time or the energy to go build a genuinely meaningful legacy in our actual communities.
We take the easy, prepackaged win.
We settle for climbing a manufactured corporate ladder because we are too drained to climb a literal mountain or master a difficult philosophical concept or build a deep, enduring relationship with our neighbors.
The author's speculation here is razor sharp, and it requires us to really look in the mirror as a society.
It does.
They argue that when people express this intense fear that AI will take away their meaning, what they are actually expressing is a terrifying subconscious realization. They fear that modern society has never actually taught them how to live.
Yep.
It has only ever taught them how to be economically necessary. The text frames this as a scathing indictment of our current civilization. If your entire sense of self-worth, your entire structural integrity as a person, collapses the exact moment you are no longer required to produce capital for an employer, then you haven't been taught how to be a human being.
You've been trained like a tool.
You've been taught how to be a machine. And the profound historical irony is that now that we have actual literal machines capable of doing the machine work, the humans are having a collective identity crisis because they don't know who they are without the assembly line.
It's as if humanity has been walking around in a rigid, full-body cast for so many centuries that our actual muscles have completely atrophied.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
And now that the technologist is finally coming at us with the saw to take the cast off, we are screaming in terror, convinced that without the cast, we won't be able to stand up.
But we can stand up. We just need physical therapy.
The text is arguing that AI is the tool that can help us build a new environment where we finally undergo the physical therapy to rehabilitate those muscles of genuine human purpose.
That is an excellent way to frame the psychological rehabilitation the author believes is necessary.
But I want to pivot here. I have to bring us back to the ground because we have been exploring this soaring, utopian, Jane Austen-esque paradise of art, health, and family.
Right. It sounds almost too good to be true.
Exactly. If this future is mathematically and technologically possible, which the AI projections suggest it is, why is the current cultural mood so incredibly dark? Why is the dread so thick you can cut it with a knife?
The doomerism.
Right. Which leads us into the final and arguably most critical section of our source material, the exploration of the dark timeline and the moral duty of the developers building these systems.
The text is not naive. It fully acknowledges that this transition period is incredibly fragile and fraught with immense peril.
It's a very dangerous moment.
It extensively discusses the growing wave of what it terms doomerism surrounding artificial intelligence. This isn't just a fringe internet phenomenon. The fear is palpable, widespread, and it is beginning to manifest in extreme, unpredictable ways.
It's spilling over into the real world.
The text references a specific chilling anecdote to illustrate this point. The reported incident where Sam Altman's home was attacked with a Molotov cocktail by an individual reportedly driven to violence by unchecked, rapidly spiraling anxiety about the future of AI.
That is just terrifying.
It illustrates that we are no longer in the realm of polite academic debate. People are experiencing genuine, visceral, existential terror about losing their livelihoods, their ability to feed their families, and their fundamental place in the hierarchy of the world.
And the source doesn't patronize the public by dismissing that fear as completely baseless paranoia. It introduces a massive, glaring caveat to this entire utopian vision.
And this caveat is everything.
As we promised at the beginning, we're going to look at the economics here impartially, because understanding the mechanism of this caveat is crucial to understanding the text.
Yes, the source states with absolute clarity that this utopian future of democratic leisure will not manifest automatically simply because the underlying software and hardware exist.
It's not guaranteed.
Technology is not destiny, it is merely capacity. The crucial defining condition is distribution.
Okay, let's talk about distribution.
The text lays out a very clear economic mechanism. If the immense, unprecedented wealth, efficiency, and productivity generated by automated systems are captured entirely by a narrow, monopolistic class of owners and shareholders, while the vast majority of ordinary people are simply displaced from their jobs, stripped of their income, and left to fend for themselves in a system that still requires money to survive, then AI will not be an engine of liberation.
It becomes a weapon.
It will become an instrument of unprecedented feudal domination. The text makes a profound point here. The automation of human labor is only a tragedy if the wealth created by that automated labor is hoarded. If it is distributed in a way that allows the broader population to decouple their survival from their labor, it is a triumph.
Here's where the essay gets really combative, and I want to push back on it to test the logic.
Okay, go ahead.
The author looks at this potential dark timeline, looks at the skyrocketing anxiety of the public, and places the moral responsibility squarely, almost exclusively, on the shoulders of the developers. The people sitting in the labs building the proprietary AI models.
Yes, the engineers.
Now, I have to play defense for the engineers for a second.
Yeah.
Is it realistically a software engineer's job to solve global sociology?
It's a heavy burden to place on them.
Are we really expecting a team of coders to figure out macroeconomic wealth distribution, universal basic income, and the philosophical meaning of life? Shouldn't their only mandate be to build the most capable, alignment-tested language model they can, release it safely, and let the politicians, the sociologists, and the voters figure out how to restructure society?
It is a very common defense, but the author of our source material anticipates it and answers it with a definitive, categorical no.
A hard no.
A very hard no. The text argues that the engineers and executives developing proprietary artificial general intelligence have a special, unavoidable historical and moral responsibility. They cannot ethically hide behind the standard Silicon Valley ethos of, we just build tools, society decides how to use them.
Move fast and break things doesn't work here.
Exactly. They cannot behave as though their only fiduciary duty is to their venture capitalists, to product launch timelines, or to achieving higher technical benchmarks on a graph. Why? Because, as the essay explicitly states, they are not merely building consumer software products. They are actively, consciously building the underlying machinery of a completely new human civilization.
Building the machinery of a new civilization. That is a staggering phrase.
It is.
What the author is saying is that the scale of this technology is so absolute, it alters the very physics of society. You can't just build the engine that makes human labor obsolete, throw the switch, walk away and say, not my department, let the government figure out the fallout.
Exactly. And because of that immense power, the text lays out very specific actionable demands for these developers and these corporations.
What are the demands?
It argues they have a moral duty to communicate the truth about both sides of the transition. They must acknowledge the valid fear of job displacement with absolute honesty, without sugarcoating it with corporate jargon about synergistic job creation.
Stop pretending everyone is just going to become a prompt engineer.
Right. But much more importantly, they must actively fund and promote serious global education about what a viable post-work society actually looks like. They must leverage their immense capital to support transition policies that preserve human dignity, ensure baseline income, and maintain democratic stability during the turbulence.
Put their money where their mouth is.
And most fascinatingly, the text demands that these tech conglomerates step outside of STEM. It demands they commission historians, sociologists, economists, developmental psychologists, philosophers, and artists to help humanity actively imagine and design the good life after compulsory labor.
They essentially need to hire the modern Jane Austens.
Yes.
They need people who understand the human soul to help paint the picture of where we are going. Because, as the text points out so astutely, the public currently needs much more than just a sanitized press release offering vague reassurance. They need a tangible, compelling vision.
People need to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
You can't just look a truck driver or an accountant in the eye and say, don't worry, your job is gone, but the government might send you a check.
Yeah.
You have to show them what they are transitioning toward. You have to prove to them that a world beyond work is not a world beyond purpose.
The vision that must be communicated, and this is the crux of the entire essay, is the intentional transformation of what was historically aristocratic leisure, the exclusive privilege of a tiny, wealthy elite, into democratic leisure for the entirety of the human race.
Democratic leisure.
The developers must make it abundantly clear that the goal is not to create a society of idle vanity, screen-addicted decadence, or meaningless consumption. The goal is to build the infrastructure for a society characterized by cultivated minds, intensely healthy bodies, deep and enduring friendships, moral seriousness, and voluntary civic service.
It's a tall order, but it's inspiring.
The author asserts a very powerful dual critique here. To greet this magnificent technological possibility only with apocalyptic fear is a profound failure of imagination on the part of the general public.
Okay, so the public needs to dream bigger.
However, to develop these systems in secret without explicitly loudly explaining their liberating promise is an unforgivable failure of leadership on the part of the developers.
They cannot allow the public imagination to be entirely monopolized by dystopian sci-fi fantasies. They have to step up to the podium and speak with moral clarity about the specific parameters of the paradise that becomes possible.
They have to sell the vision.
It is a powerful, almost desperate call to action for the tech industry. Do not sell the future to humanity as a looming threat. Offer it as an emancipation.
It perfectly encapsulates the profound duality of the historical moment we are currently navigating.
It really does.
If you look at the broad sweep of history, we have spent centuries inventing machines to spare our muscles from breaking. We invented global networks to spare us the isolation of distance. We invented computers to spare our minds from tedious calculations.
Right, step by step.
Now, we are on the precipice of inventing a synthetic intelligence designed to spare us from the endless, grinding burden of tasks that require human suffering just to maintain the status quo.
The final step.
All the pieces are currently falling into place for a monumental, unprecedented leap in human flourishing. The only variable left is whether we have the collective wisdom to govern it, the courage to embrace it, and the moral fortitude to distribute its fruits equitably.
So what does this all mean as we attempt to synthesize this incredibly dense deep dive?
There's so much to digest.
There is. We have journeyed through a truly radical, meticulously detailed projection of our potential future. We've explored a vision where artificial intelligence is not the grim reaper coming to end human usefulness, but rather the catalyst for the very beginning of human life in its absolute fullest form.
Or rebirth, really.
We're talking about fundamentally rewiring the human experience, a shift from a civilization organized entirely around the mechanics of toil, fear, artificial scarcity, and chronic exhaustion, to one built organically on joy, friendship, contemplation, lifelong learning, and love.
We have looked closely at the historical precedents, drawing lines from the insulated 1800s leisure class to the crushing modern burdens of the nuclear family.
Right.
We've examined the dual transformation of medicine, moving from symptom management to the eradication of socially produced disease. We've envisioned the potential unlocking of a global artistic renaissance by freeing up the cognitive bandwidth of billions.
The golden age of the arts.
And importantly, we've confronted the very real, very valid anxieties of this fragile transition, recognizing that the technology alone is insufficient. It requires a robust moral framework and a dedicated commitment to democratic leisure from the very people architecting the machinery of our new world.
I want to talk directly to you, the listener, right now as we close this out. I want you to mentally scan your own life.
Just take a moment.
Think about your daily routine. Think about the friction of your morning commute. Think about the endless strings of emails, the budget anxiety at the end of the month, the sheer crushing physical and emotional weight of economic coercion that you carry around on your shoulders every single day, often without even realizing it.
It's heavy.
Now, I want you to genuinely imagine that weight completely evaporating. Poof. Gone. Not just for a 2-week vacation, not just for a long weekend, but forever.
It leaves a profound, almost deafening silence in its wake. And navigating that silence is where the true challenge and the ultimate beauty of this proposed future lies.
Beautifully said.
So I will leave you with this final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up and every single one of your material needs is perfectly, frictionlessly met by an AI infrastructure.
Total abundance.
And from that exact moment forward, you can never use your career, your job title, or your economic output to define your identity or establish your status ever again. When all the noise of survival is stripped away, what is the very first thing you would do to discover who you actually are?